Hi, my name is Reid and I am a 7th grade math teacher. I am getting my intern teaching credential. Um, I'm just going to go over today the lesson plan for the California School of Education and similarities and differences between the one I use for my job. So the lesson plan that I am provided with in my job is very similar to the California School of Education's due to the fact that we have the same content, but there are differences in the phrasing and order to how which we do things. I will start with some of the similarities, comparing the CSOE's template to what I have been trained to do. This might be different from some of you guys, but to my fellow teaching interns in California, it might be very familiar. Or not. State standards are consistent, but I imagine that each school's lesson planning might be unique. For similarities, the lesson structure on a day-to-day basis is essentially the same. The terminology is different, and so is the order it's listed. Every lesson objective is aligned with the benchmark testing standard, and I follow the same guided notes principles and end with an exit ticket that I assess the mastery of skills. I introduce the topic with an example or two, depending on what the content is that day. I have a guided notes section and an independent practice section and a closer/exit ticket. I prefer to use the term exit ticket. I provide homework when appropriate, and it covers a day's lesson and scaffolded review of previous objectives, just to keep practice consistent and going. For the differences, the opening is not quite the same. We have an opening that is called a do now. It'll be fun for everybody. It is a small assignment that is part of the notes and assesses how well my students retain the previous day's lesson. Sometimes it's a little bit more personal. My students know to grab the notes and materials for the day, but this actually brings me to my first area of struggle. Our assignment says to discuss things we think might be a struggle when it comes to lesson planning. I am actually lucky to be able to tell you things I know I struggle with. I am lucky because maybe my classmates, you guys might have some insight on these problems for me, which I would greatly appreciate. Back to my point though, my students know what to do. I have trouble getting them engaged when they sit down. I teach 7th graders, so they are much more enthusiastic about talking to their friends or trying to take my supplies when I'm not looking so they can make arts and crafts instead of working. I might show videos at first in the beginning of class, and that can help sometimes, but I don't want to rely on that because it doesn't help my teaching ability. But back to the differences, we'll get more into the struggles later. My lesson planning template does not have the same breakdown for planning. My notes and my daily class structure are actually what resemble the California State of Education's template. In other words, my materials template instead is what's more similar to the structure provided from the CSOE. My lesson planning is what we call backwards planning. I take the benchmark and I break down the standards into units and objectives, all in separate templates though. Then I have a weekly planning template where I have my standards, objectives, materials, and a series of questions that assess mastery, which are typically my exit ticket questions. And instead of breaking down each aspect of the lesson that day, the timing of each, I have a breakdown for what, how, and why. What knowledge and skills am I teaching? How am I going to teach it? Why am I teaching this objective? I also make accommodations for students with IEPs on my template as well. The other area of struggle is making the best objective that aligns with standards. On paper and in practice, I still do this correctly. I have a hard time trying to reteach older skills while still maintaining the standards they need to master for the benchmark. The students have to be moving forward, but due to COVID, most students I have were in distance learning for division, especially operations with decimals, mainly multiplication and division. I need ways for them to effectively practice and relearn these skills while also having daily objectives that align with the standards. It's hard to keep up. While on the subject of time, the other issue is it's hard to get through guided practice with all the behavior issues I face, and with the aforementioned gaps in learning. There's a problem of not having enough independent practice time before the exit ticket, and this might have an effect on accuracy while assessing. Thank you all for listening. I welcome any insight and knowledge from my peers.